You want to just take it, the children skip along? You take that, all right?
I'll pick it up if you like.
Yeah. Okay. Slate 3, roll 3. Davis.
Well, the children skipped along in front of me, and we entered this South Vietnamese controlled village right on the road, flying the South Vietnamese flag. But it was interesting that the people there knew where the children had come from, of course, and were sympathetic. They could see what I was doing, trying to do. And quite a number of times they'd come to the doors of their houses, their huts, and say, no, 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 Bin Si Saigon, meaning the Saigon troops are here.
Be careful.
Be careful. And it took me about an hour to extricate myself, and winding through this village, through some huts, and taking cover, and I finally got onto the road. Of course, 15 minutes later I was arrested anyway, and taken for interrogation, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And what happened in interrogation?
Well, fortunately I was taken to a nearby town, and a captain whom I knew before, whom I was quite friendly with, asked me what I was doing. I said I'd just come from Saigon that morning and I was doing my natural thing, taking film along the road. And he then said, well, I've just got to go out for 5 minutes, so I won't be back before 5 minutes, but at least that. And can you just wait here in the office? And he left me alone. Which stage, and deliberately, I suppose, no doubt deliberately. And I strapped the film to inside my leg and other places, which wouldn't really have hidden it from anybody who wanted it. Then he came back in and said, I must take all your film. So I gave him the unexposed film, the film didn't matter. And he gave me a receipt for it, and he said, you sure that's all? I said, sure. He said, okay. Now you have the receipt for it, and I've told them I've taken your film. You will be taken for interrogation now, and good luck.
Didn't matter. Mm.
Good luck. And they never did search me for the film, whether he was just sympathetic in the situation, whether because we were friends, or whether he was in fact a Viet Cong agent, which is always possible. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. You've been wounded 6 times, I think. The last time, seriously.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I was 6 times hospitalized. I was wounded a few more times, but only lightly. Well, the last time was 1974, a year before the war ended in Indochina. And I was in Cambodia, covering very close action with the Cambodian communists about 60 or 80 meters away. And quite a lot of wounded were being taken. And I was helping drag some wounded in, and they began to concentrate on the tree that I was behind, thinking that that was a command post or something. And a young lieutenant nearby on an armoured personnel carrier, something like a tank, Bren gun carrier, and he stood up and said, they've got you targeted, get across here. I sort of was in two minds, but I did take his word on this occasion. So I raced across and took the cover behind the armoured personnel carrier, but within a minute a launched grenade or a mortar, I'm not sure, landed about 4 feet away and killed a couple of soldiers and severely wounded a photographer friend, Cambodian, I was with, and wounded me very badly in the right leg particularly, and the left leg a little, and sort of in the back with shrapnel. And fortunately here I was carrying a recorder, which was a small cassette recorder, which was smashed to pieces, but saved my life.
Mm. What, after experiences like that, have you got any conclusions about death and dying? What's your attitude to that?
I was never afraid of being killed, because that's that. I mean, you're done. And I didn't want to be badly wounded. I'd seen many badly wounded people. I didn't want a load of shrapnel in my guts, for instance, and die a painful death on the battlefield. I just took it as it come, otherwise. As
far as you're concerned, is death it? That's the finish?
No. No, I think we go on to something else. Maybe reincarnation, I don't know.
Do you come to those sort of conclusions, I know it's just touching on it, but as a result of being in a war zone though, does it make
I think so. I had sympathy with the people who are fighting the war on both sides, and as it happens, of course, in Indochina they're all Buddhists. They believe strongly in more or less reincarnation, and I guess I developed that philosophy also.
Part of that is working off your own karma. Do you feel that you're almost compelled to go into battle to do something like that?
I think you shouldn't fight it, and it gives you an very much added dimension to your life and living. And
what's that? What gives you dimension?
Well, you see things in a much highly developed state, and aware of feelings and just life itself. I can't explain it any better, I'm afraid.
Do you see beyond this present physical reality?
No, don't really, but I'm sure it's not going to end just with this life.
Yeah. Have you lost many friends on the battlefield?
Oh, many, many, many. Many, I don't know how many. Maybe in Indochina, in Cambodia, for instance, there were killed well over 30, and most of whom were my friends. In Vietnam,
they were correspondents, you mean?
Correspondents, cameramen, some Western, some Asian.
It never gets any better taking that acceptance that they'll no longer be there?
Well, I'm very sad every time it's happened, of course, and it's an extraordinary number because it's 40 or 50 in Vietnam. Some were very, very close friends.
There was one instance, I think, where you had a seriously wounded cameraman with you and you were trying to help him back. Can you relate how that happened and what happened?
Yeah, he was a Cambodian photographer, and we got into very close action with the Cambodian communists, and we couldn't go forward because they had the only cover, the communists had the only cover. We had to go back. We're in a rice field, and my friend that stood up to take a picture, well, got up a little, take a quick picture, and a lucky shot, or a very accurate shot, took him in the throat. He was very, very badly wounded, and another Cambodian photographer I was with and I carried him back, but it took us an hour to crawl back, dragging him actually. And we're only with a total of 30 men. Some of them were killed and wounded too, and we finally got back to a little bit of cover. We still had 50 meters of open ground to cover to get across. And the commander said, look, we've almost surrounded, we've got to get out.
There's no cover at all?
No, and we've got to leave the wounded. Just at that stage, a couple of soldiers tried to carry one of their friends across the open ground, and they were all killed. So you had to run and roll and get up and run and roll, and maybe you'd get across. And he said, make up your mind about your friend, and who appeared to be dying anyway. And I looked to see the other Cambodian was then taking his identification papers out of his pocket, stripping him of those. And I knew that he intended that he should stay there because journalists were killed by the Khmer Rouge, by the Cambodian communists, particularly Cambodian journalists, and he was taking the identification to make it look like he was just a civilian caught in the crossfire. And we said, okay, so we leave him, and we did, and only 11 survived out of that 30, and of the 11, 5 or 6 were wounded.
What, they just let loose when you started going across that land?
Yes, yes, they cut loose. They had a machine gun covering that open ground, and of course some were wounded getting across. You
say you were a professional sprint champion in Australia before you went over there. I imagine that would
not a champion, no. I was a professional sprinter.
That would bring out the champion in you.
Well, it did, yes. I think I went faster on that occasion, yeah.
Do you think that there's any place for a woman in a war zone?
Oh, there were a number of women covered the war in Indochina. Some were on some sort of women's kick. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, they were trying to prove something because of their sex. And that didn't work. If they were just foreign correspondents, photographers or whatever, covering the war, they went about it, and they did it without any resource to using their sex or making a claim that they were women's lib or something like that. And they were accepted by their colleagues, their male colleagues, and they did a very good job, and there were some good women photographers and good women journalists, some of whom were killed.
You talked earlier of camaraderie amongst cameramen, journalists who live so close to death and come out of it. Do you think that there develops a certain closeness between men in that instance that can never really be approached in a relationship between a man and a woman?
Yes. Not necessarily. No, I think just between people, whether they're men or women. It happened that most of them, of course, were men, but there is a camaraderie, and I've seen it with the soldiers, with the Asian soldiers. Some Cambodian women fought they were soldiers alongside their men, and the same camaraderie developed, and there wasn't any overtones of sex at all. It was just the same camaraderie.
Is that closeness, though, much closer because you've been so close to death than you would get in, say,
yes,
a
I think
marriage?
it strips everything away, and you see your colleague or friend in exactly as he is, and it doesn't matter if he acts what we might say badly. It doesn't mean that he becomes a bad friend. It depends on the situation, but you tend to overlook